Welcome. The U.S. Senate has passed a deal struck between Republicans, Democrats, and President Barack Obama to increase the U.S. debt ceiling and avert a default. He's getting ready to do a news conference and will be signing this bill into law shortly. My guest here to discuss it is Democratic political consultant Brad Bannon with Bannon Communications Research in Washington, D.C. Brad, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on the show again, Scott.
Well, this took a while there, Brad. Is this considered a win for the Tea Party, do you think?
Well, I think for the most part it was, for a couple of reasons. One is the discussion was focused on budget deficits instead of what Americans really want, which is more jobs. And secondly, if you look at the agreement, it's much more of what the Tea Party wanted than the president wanted. Neither sides are completely happy with the deal because they both had to give up things. But the Tea Party got its main demand, which was that the deficit would be done through budget cuts and not through closing corporate tax loopholes. Now that once the president signs the agreement this afternoon, that paves the way for $1 trillion in immediate budget cuts, but there's nothing in the legislation immediately that's going to close corporate tax loopholes. So it's more of what the Tea Party wanted than what the president wanted.
Let's talk about the president's base. In one sense, well, he got something done here, and then it's kind of off the table, between now and the elections, which is a good thing. But how does this affect the base with him?
Well, the Democratic progressive base is very unhappy. They feel that the agreement that was reached on Sunday gives away on important democratic principles. I mean, again, it's all budget cuts, which is what the Republicans and the Tea Party wants, and nothing about closing corporate tax loopholes, which is what liberal Democrats wanted. So the Democratic base is very unhappy, and the president is going to have to struggle with the fact that when he runs for re-election next year, there's not going to be much enthusiasm among the Democratic base for turning out to vote.
Would it be safe to say, too, that these kinds of cuts could have a detrimental effect on the economy and or jobs?
Absolutely. I mean, there are two things about this budget agreement which are very striking. First of all, there's nothing in there that would help create jobs. And it's really amazing how little people in D.C. think about what Americans want. Americans have been screaming about creating jobs ever since Barack Obama was elected president. And instead of that, we do health care, and now we do deficit reduction. We do everything except what Americans want, which is to create jobs. So it's a real problem.
Talk about the reality of the situation. I mean, this whole deal on the surface appears to those who are skilled and knowledgeable to be largely symbolic, in that the interest on the debt that we were having is about 1.6% of GDP, which, for you and me is a big number, but for the country, not really. Were we really in danger of some kind of default here, or was this just some sort of congressional showdown that, for one reason or another, had to take place?
Well, I think that first of all, I think if it may have been symbolic, but if there hadn't been an agreement, I think you were taking the chance that there'd be a very bad economic chain reaction, both here in the United States and around the world. And when push came to shove, the president didn't want to risk that. Right. And that's why I think essentially he settled this deal mostly on Republican terms, because he didn't want to take the chance that this would create an economic chain reaction in terms of the financial markets, both on Wall Street and abroad. And once you started that chain reaction, you really didn't know how bad and how far the effects would be.
Right. I guess to clarify then, I guess what I meant to say was we weren't really in that big of financial trouble, but the perception was that we were, so that would have caused a huge problem had we defaulted here.
Yes, the perception would have done that at all. But, the reality is we don't really have a budget problem. We have a jobs problem.
Right.
If more Americans had jobs, there would be more tax revenues going to the federal government. There'd be more money circulating in the economy. And this agreement does nothing to create jobs. In fact, it probably will lead to layoffs both in the private and public sector that will make the unemployment situation even worse and risk the little growth we have in the economy right now.
Finally, we got your take on the Democratic side here. What do Republicans get out of this? How can they feel good about any of this?
Well, I think the Republicans got two things. One is they got cuts in federal spending without having to give up any concessions on closing tax loopholes for their friends on Wall Street. So they won that one clearly. Secondly, they focused the discussion on their issue, which is budget cuts, instead of the issue that most Americans want to talk about, which is creating jobs. And thirdly, they stand to gain from this special congressional Uber committee that's been created, because if the Congress does not accept the committee's recommendations in whole, there will be a automatic 4% cut in all federal spending across the board, which is exactly what the Tea Party wants, is to bring the federal government and its vital programs to its knees.
I can think of, in closing here, 12 jobs that this created, though. The House-Senate subcommittee that's going to work.
Well, yeah, that's great. They're great creating their own jobs. There are 12 new jobs, and hope on probably hundreds of staff positions to go along with it. But it does nothing to create real jobs out where we really need it, which is on Main Street.
Brad Bannon is president of Bannon Communications Research in Washington, D.C. Brad, thank you.
Scott, it's always a pleasure.
And thanks for watching.